Welcome to Ready, Set, Real Estate, where we will help empower and educate you on many different aspects of real estate, finance, and investing. Each week, we will expand your knowledge and uncover hidden truths. We will break down real-world scenarios and study actual how-to strategies. Anyone can buy real estate, but together we'll ensure you make smart real estate investment decisions. Now, here's your host, award-winning author, international speaker, and real estate educator, Lisa Gillett.
Happy Wednesday. Checking in. Mic check. I've had quite a week, productive week. We've recovered from last week. And then there was this climate change that apparently the news and everyone is accelerating, this storm that was supposed to wipe us all out, flood us all out. And by grace, none of that happened. So that's great. In fact, I shouldn't say this out loud, but instead of ducking and taking cover, what are you supposed to do, right? When it rains, I really want to find this video. So there's this video that mocks and makes fun of Californians when it comes to rain. Like, we're like, oh my gosh, it's gonna rain. If we only just traveled more outside of California, how golden we would truly realize our weather is, right? How golden it is. All right. Well, that's what's been going on in the world. I actually want to also talk about there's also let me just use this. I'm just going to use a banner real quick. So apparently, let me just kind of news update. I'm just going to call this news update. Cyber tax MLS. Okay, boom. I'm going to use this as a banner. So apparently, there's been a cyber attack on the MLS. Oh, welcome. Ready, Set, Real Estate. You're watching one of the top real estate shows. We're still rocking, going strong. In fact, I connected with our attorney, our trademark attorney. It looks like we've got a new international mark that's been granted. So I'm excited. So stay tuned, because what that means is we're going to make some moves. Okay. We are going to make some moves. It's coming. Stay tuned. It's coming. Okay. So with that being said, update. So there's been cyber attacks on the MLS. This is affecting the Bay Area, San Francisco, Northern California. And I was reading their software is called Rapatoni. And there was some ransomware that got in there August 8th. So the system went down. The system has been down, slowly coming to online as of, I think, yesterday. I was reading, and the CRMLS, and I'm going to share with you a little bit of background about how the MLS works. For those of you who aren't familiar, MLS is the multiple listing service. So that's the system which feeds to Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com and all these websites that you all use, but don't realize that they're all coming from our system in our database. And so one of our database has been hit, and I'm reading like all the doomsday headlines. San Francisco market is crashing because of the cyber attacks on the MLS. No, that's not what's happening. Yes, it's a complete inconvenience to agents and brokers, because that's where we post our new listings, we update price changes, we change status. That's where we're able to run comps. So of course, without it, it definitely makes our job that much more difficult. The good news is there are other programs like Realtor Property Source, and the CRMLS is also another another platform known as the Matrix that is now or has been offering no cost access to those non members who've been affected by the MLS cyber attacks. So they're overall, we're seeing the industry come together and try to hold it together as yes, everyone's butt is being kicked right now with these rates. You hear what's happening in the commercial market, all that stuff is going on. Yeah, so that's what's been happening. Before I continue blabbing, I definitely want to do, I definitely want to do sound check because I can go on and on and on. And next thing you know, it's like I'm talking and nothing is coming out of my mouth, right? Let's just make sure. Whoops. Okay, cool. Very good. Easy, easy, breezy. So that's what's been happening. I wanted to share about that cyber attacks. If you've heard about it, if you've got people that are in the Bay Area, because no one's really talking about this. And I didn't know until last night. Or this morning, last night or this morning, I was up late or up early reading, and it came across my feed, and I was like, oh, that's a bummer for the Bay Area agents who are trying to function and now have this issue. I mean, it's difficult enough with the market as it is, right? And difficult can just mean this. So difficulty just means our days on market have gone from like, 7 days to now we're like in our 30 to 50, 70, depending on your market. Essentially, that means from the day a property is listed, on average, right? What is the average days on market before that property goes under contract, meaning from the time it goes live to the time it receives an offer, negotiation happens, and an acceptance, thereby changing the status of that property from active to active under contract or active to pending. And that's how the days on market is calculated. So, yes, it has been difficult because that means for industry professionals who've been used to a certain pay cycle, that means their pay cycle has gotten longer, right? So make sure you've got good financial planning, make sure you've got a savings. That's why when you're, whether you're an entrepreneur, independent contractor, a business owner, you've got to save. You've got to, put into yourself, your Roth IRAs or your self funded IRAs, your different investment vehicles, so that while you're up, you've got something to tap into as the market pivots, because that's just the nature of the business. That's the nature of the business. Right? Not, I mean, you get your license and you come on board, and then you're told to get out there and solicit, but at the same time, you should be told about the pay cycles in this business, about about saving, part-time jobs as you're building up your career in this business. Unless you come ready with a book of business, then that's a whole nother conversation. So speaking of book of business, today we're going to be talking about working with investors. I'm excited about this topic, especially because as new agents or those of you who are looking to get into the market, those of you who are, attending those investor seminars, and then they say, go find an agent and gain access to their MLS, right? So I felt it was a perfect segue to talk about the MLS, the multiple listing service, as it's going through what it's going through. Oh, this is the behind the scenes story I was going to share about the MLS. So here's what's interesting. The MLS is a database for industry professionals, agents, brokers, appraisers. And what's interesting is there isn't just one MLS. There is a conglomerate, right? There's all kinds of associations that control, so Association of Realtors that control and own various MLS for various areas. This may not mean much to you, but let's put it in this perspective. As an industry professional, you have to pay to join that respective MLS, and that comes with the membership fee. In fact, our dues are up now. I was getting emails the other day. It says 10 more days left, I think, for our dues. And so you pay every 6 months, something like that. And imagine being part of multiple MLS so that you can have access to multiple jurisdictions, areas, counties, cities. And then there's state level, right? And then if you are a broker who has reciprocal licenses, then you've got to pay to join that state's MLS. And what I thought was interesting when I joined with Georgia, I think there was it's like almost $1,000. It's like, wow, that's different. So this is why I say to my clients, this is a team effort. When we are looking for properties, it's a team effort, because the sad reality as it seeps in over time is that you as the consumer have access to a lot more properties than we do. And that's because our systems, those various systems, feeds into about 24 third-party sites that you may sign up and give your contact, your name, phone, and email, and then they give you access. What they do with that data, you should read the fine print, of course. And so this is why I share again with my clients and our clients that it's a team effort. When you find, or if you find a property online that I may not have shared with you, the difference could be timing. That property could be directly listed with that third party site, or that property can be listed with our system. What our system has done is create a way that at least it will give our agents and our clients a time advantage, meaning when new listings go up, or they are listed under the quote unquote coming soon section or filter or feature, that means that property is available only to the agents, brokers, and clients who are in that participating MLS, and it is not released to the general public or fed or syndicated is the word, to those third-party sites. So again, team effort. All I ask, or I encourage you, if you're working with a realtor professional or an agent, and when I say working, I mean exclusively. You're not as in you're working with this one, and then you met another one at open house and you're working with that one, and then you say something as ridiculous as someone once told me and said, well, I'm going to work with the agent who gets me the house. That's going to cost you. And that person who said that, it cost them dearly after they decided they didn't want to work with our firm exclusively. That's fine. We just work exclusively. I don't date everybody. I provide excellent service. You have 17 plus years of experience and expertise in challenging deals, not just the easy ones. And so I have to remind people, you're not paying for me to hit a button and email you a list of properties. You are paying. For example, I just had a client get $105,000 discount on their property. It's $105,000 while we are still in a seller's market, depending on your area. So that's what you're getting. Not all agents are created equal, as you know the saying, right? Not all industry professionals, whatever industry that is, are created equal. There's something called that added value that comes with experience. Experience, not just theory, but the practical experience and the life lessons, because I certainly have got a whole bunch of anecdotes that I share with you from time to time. And that's probably what I notice I use this show for, is to come on and talk about my day to day and share the anecdotes. All right. With that being said, let's jump into let's talk about quarterly goals. I think I touched on it a little bit. We are doing today's show classroom style, so I've got a PowerPoint presentation for you. Take great notes. And if it applies, great. If it applies, great. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. And you can, share and change the channel, but not before you share. So make sure you invite someone. Press 1 lets me know you're here. Press 2 lets me know you shared it. And of course, as we jump into today's show, if you find anything mic drop worthy, go ahead and drop that mic emoji for us and continue to share and show us some love. Okay. You know what? I'm going to skip quarterly goals. I talk about it today all the time, but I just was talking about the cyber attacks that's been happening. So let me just get into disclaimers. I'll get into the show topic and sponsor. Before I do that, you know what? Let's do show sponsor. We'll be right back. So shout out to Anthony Lee and myself, co-author of Investment Blueprint, especially as we're going to be talking about working with real estate investors. This book right here is a gem, written really, really basic, really easy. I mean, this should be your real estate investing 101. I think it's better than the real estate investing for dummies, because we are targeting teens and millennials in this book, and it's written that way, basic. All right, we'll be right back after this sponsor break. Real Estate 100, the Teen and Millennial Investment Blueprint. We'll have Anthony back on the show. I just saw he had he was posting, he had about 5 deals under contract, but he says, as I like to say, that deal isn't done until the check has cleared your bank account. They do have such a thing as pulling a recording. Pulling a recording means means bad news, and unless you can work through it. But don't get so excited once they say, yay, we funded, because the next step after funding is the recording part. And title can always pull a recording for just sometimes some mistakes. You have people that's handling the paperwork, and sometimes they make mistakes, and they have to pull the recording and make sure that it's all good. Or sometimes, like in my last transaction, a lien gets recorded, and then you go, oh, we got to work that out, right? So check that out. Available at any of your online retailers. And this for us has been a bestseller. It actually is an award-winning book. So yes, we get to say we are award-winning authors, and it's part of our Real Estate 100 series. So again, thank you for those of you who have been sharing and continuing with the Real Estate 100 movements. All right, so show disclaimers before I get into episode 220. 220, that's pretty cool. That's over 200 episodes of raw real estate content. Wow. Okay, for those of you who are new to the show or welcome back and you're returning to the show, you do know that the information provided on the show should not be considered legal or tax advice. Please seek legal and tax advice from those reputable, licensed professionals. All right, if you've got a situation, you need to call a professional. Do not lean on the information shared on this show. Of course, it's for edutainment purposes, education and entertainment purposes only. That's what we do here. All right, cool. Getting into the show. All right, so you should create, so depending where you are, and this is for someone, if you are jumping into the real estate game, or so if you're new, okay, so let me ask this question, right? So who is this information for, as we're talking about working with investors? For a couple people. Okay, so if you are looking to jump into investing and or wholesaling, that's flipping the contract essentially. If you're an agent yourself and you are looking to expand your network and your connections with investors, it can be an intimidating thing. I certainly was intimidated when I first got into the business. But here's what I learned. There's a couple things that I'm going to share that I've learned that has solidified why my investors call on me or why my investors lean on me. Isn't it nice to have your investor call you or call you to write up a deal where you're not just out there looking, but they're calling you and saying, "Hey, Lisa, um, I've got something. I'd like to work with you on this. Can you write this up for me?" Yeah. So there are a couple things that I've learned over time that has created what I call the added value or value add. So here's a couple things. Let's go through it together. And I'm going to drop this drop this in the chat real quick. So I'm going to keep it right there. So, and shout out to those of you who are connected with us on LA Super Agent on our YouTube channel, doing great things over there. Thank you. And who are streaming on the ERGJ Enterprises. Welcome to the BBC. If you are new to the Black Billionaires Club, so we're doing great things, and Ready Set Real Estate is an affiliate partner to all that game, all that education, all the investment strategies that come available. We are also streaming on Black Events Los Angeles. So thank you. We've been doing that for some time. I've been connected since I started Facebook. Wow. Yeah. And of course, Lisa Gillett is a Facebook watch channel. So is Ready Set Real Estate. All right. Gave you all our channels. And of course, we are connected on the radio podcast as well. So here's what I'm calling this my investor checklist. All right. So take your notes. This is what I'm referring to as an investor checklist. Number one, not necessarily in this order, but number one, create a profile. Create a profile. So yes, this is going to require you to do a couple things. Get a Word doc, a Google Doc, Google Sheets, Word Excel sheets, or email helps. I like to email myself so that I have my own running to do or notes or checklists that I can come back and create a spreadsheet for. So that's what I'm saying here. So you want to create a profile, identify what the investor is looking for, including what market, because I have investors will call me. I get calls all the time. That's kind of the perks of being a listing agent. A listing agent is you target and work with sellers. That means you've got product. You've got product to sell. You've got product to market. They know you're out here getting it, right? 10 toes to the concrete. And that's just building that relationship and letting them know how you work. Are you actively marketing? Are you farming? You are working your networks, your relationships. When you do that, save the contacts for your investors. They will reach out and say, "Hey, I'm looking for this," or "I'm looking my favorite." I can probably just pull up a string of my text messages that says, let me see for fun. Hold on. Let me see if I can share one that I got recently. Says, I probably deleted. I probably deleted. Oh, here's one. I won't be able to share it because then I don't want to share all the rest of my messages. Anyway, so it says something like to this effect. "Hi Lisa, do you have discounted multifamily and single family," or I should read it the way it comes through. "Hi Lisa, do you have discounted multifamily SFR deals in SoCal area? We offer cash and can close in 10 to 15 days. We also offer extra 1% commission aside from the commission from the seller's side." So essentially your buyer's going to pay you. So again, this is also a hot topic for those of you who've been following the channel and the show. You have been following that there is a class action lawsuit against commission. So it's a very attractive carrot to dangle in front of an agent or a broker, right? An industry professional when you talk about money and commission, because commissions can get cut. And then if your buyer is willing to pay you an additional commission, that's completely fine. It's completely ethical for your buyer to pay you an additional commission or percentage. That kind of piques your ear and you go, "Oh, okay, here's someone who's talking my language, right? Okay, so that's great. Before I get into this whole thing about this cash to close, because that's on the next slide, let's talk about what is your investor looking for? What market do you work that market? And price range. I enjoy having conversations with investors when they say, yeah, we buy everything, and we're just unlimited. And then you tell them, really, well, I've got a off-market deal, where the fixer it's 3.5 million. And you'll watch your investor cough or choke or because they're not willing to spend 3.5 million on a fixer. So again, be clear on what the price range is, right? Don't let them try to, kind of dangle this carrot and say, oh, we've got up to 20 million to spend. One of the things that I ask our investors is to show me the money. And I'll get into that shortly. So again, build that profile, create your list, company name, your contact phone number, what market are they looking in, and what is their price range, right? Because you can have investors play at different levels. It's always great to know what level are they willing to play at. What's key to understand is ask the question, as especially because we deal with those specialized or unique situations where it's senior downsizing, the death of a borrower or property owner. Our situations may involve probates or trust states, or sometimes there's something litigation, partition sales, uh, partition yeah, uh, actions. So essentially, when court's involved, are they willing to jump in or make an offer and then wait that process? Because that is a wait when we're waiting for court approval. Because court approval can also mean subject to overbid as well. Not so much fun. Also, be clear with your investor. What typically do they use? How much do they typically put into escrow? What is their deposit amount? When you're building their profile, what's really great is, once you have this conversation discussion, they'll email you their terms and spec, which is great. Once you get the terms, what their deposit is, inspection days, if they have any, contingencies, if they're waiving any, cash, all cash, or are they using a cash clause? So we'll get to that shortly. Build your profile, understand what are they looking for, what's their market and price range, and you make your notes, because not all of them are willing to do probates. A lot of my investors, because a good portion of our deals tend to be probates, so I will be straight up with them. If I have a court confirmation or no court confirmation, they'll say, oh yeah, send us those probates, we'll be willing to take a look at them, we'd be willing to write an offer. Great. So at least you know which ones, right, are willing to ride with you, because again, it's your reputation is on the line as well. You're representing the seller, whether it's the estate or you're working alongside an attorney. You want to help that team also feel confident that your buyer, if you're going to also represent the buyer, right, if you're double ending, will also perform. That's important. That's when these deals become stressful, is when you haven't really qualified your investor, or you don't really understand how they're purchasing. Okay, so the next point I want to make is understand the risk when you're working with investors. Does the investor or that investor actually close on their offer? Do they assign it to another party? Everyone's an investor. You can go ahead and, Vistaprint or, all these other online platforms, even Canva, drop your business card, throw your name on there and call yourself an investor. That's all that's needed. However, you're not an investor, right? I've come across people that have gone to a seminar and they come out and again, they say, oh, I'm an investor. And then they kind of give me their blurb, their scripted line. And then when I have to qualify them, I then find out they're not really an investor. They may have just started and they were told that they could buy a house with no money down. California is going to spank you spank you horribly. Hallie's going to spank you horribly. I recall I had a property and I had an investor come from Ohio, and he young. Well, his age had nothing to do with it. He was experienced, but when he said he wanted to write an offer, he said, I'd be interested in writing an offer. And I said, great. What's your deposit? He said, 1,500. And I was like, no, that's not going to do it. No, no. He's like, really? How much? I said, you need more, like at minimum 10,000. And if you're going to be really aggressive and write like no contingency and cash, why not just make the whole deposit the cash offer? I've had a couple investors do that, right? Write a $750,000 cash offer, and that's what the deposit is. 10-day close. I like it. Now that's what we're talking about, right? But not every investor is going to do that. And it's your job, right? If you're working with an investor, to know this. It's your job to cross-qualify them. The reason being is because it's your reputation, your name, and you don't want to stress the other parties involved. If you are representing the investor, working alongside another buyer or even the seller, you're bringing the investor to the deal, and the seller may not have representation. Again, your name, your reputation is on the hook, especially because this is a very small world when we talk about the people that are actually actively working this business. Actively working in this business. Drop that in there. Actively. Are you active is a question, right? Actively working in this business. One of the things I ask my investors for, sometimes they volunteer a list of properties that they have recently closed. If you have access to the database, it takes you nothing. It's very minimal work. Go ahead and cross-reference that property list. Look at how much they paid for it. Look at the asking. Look at how much time it took them to close the deal. Verify if their entity is the owner on title. Sometimes it is, and sometimes they'll kind of refinance and then they'll change ownership, but it'll all be, same company type thing. You can ask those questions. Is your investor going to be using an entity, an LLC or a corp? Because you will need those documentation as well. The articles, you'll need proof. Who's the managing partner? Who has authority to make the offer? These are things that you'll need for your deal. So you should ask up front. That way, when you're ready to pull the trigger, time is of the essence. There's a deadline. Right now, foreclosures are happening. Foreclosures are happening. Again, for people in the back, foreclosures are happening. You want to make sure you've got a full, complete package. You have everything you need to submit that offer. You look solid. You've got a clean offer. You've got your proof of funds or letter of intent. You've got your articles, and it's properly signed, right? So actively working in this business is key when you are working with these investors. I'm not saying that you decide just because your investor may not be as experienced that you don't work with them, because I hear me say it all the time. Every expert was once a beginner, and that new investor may be leaning on you to guide them through the process. You both might be new to this, and that makes for an excellent partnership, meaning you were there from the beginning. You were there to guide them and show them, like, here's typically how much we want for deposit. Here's typically the time frame. My investors ask me all the time, how much time do you think we would need, Lisa? How short of an inspection contingency should we write? They want to know what can they get away with is essentially almost what the question is. How much can they leverage is what they want to know. And they're leaning on you to know that. So this is why I say understand the risk of whether you're working with someone who's going to flip the contract to somebody else who's actually closing, because here where the risk is involved, the person assigning it may not find someone that can actually perform on that contract. Now you're messing up your timelines. Your seller either has to be closed by a certain deadline, especially if you're facing a trustee sale and or auction date. That can really throw a wrench in your whole deal if you find out that the person that is your investor is not your real buyer. They're flipping the contract. Very important. Ask the right questions so that you can get the answers. Value add. So you're added value. As you're building this profile, you're understanding the risk, you're asking, hey, do you assign it or do you actually close, and are you funding it? You ask the questions. If you are going to use hard money or private money, who are you using? What's the name of the lender? Who's the company? So that you can do your research and find out, is that lender still funding? Because guess what? When money is tight, not all these companies are available or have the resources to fund those deals. It's almost like they pick and choose which ones, right? They're looking at the LTV on those deals. They're also looking at the relationship with the investor. Have they done a deal with that investor before? So you've got to also pay attention to that. The investor who's using the private money or hard money also is relying on a relationship they have with the lender. Got to know this stuff. This is the behind the scenes. This is the work you've got to do before you get yourself tied up in a contract with an investor and everyone starts to say, I hate investors. No, it's not that they hate investors. It's that the investor or the people in the deal were not all being transparent. They're not being upfront, or they're not understanding or knowing what they're doing. Because I'll ask my investor, what are you doing? Are you actually going to use liquid cash or are we going hard money? When you tell me, then I know how much time I need to get us, and we don't have to, stress people out about the fact that we're not going to close this deal in 10 days. Not going to happen. If you get caught up writing a 10-day cash deal and then you pivot to some other type of funding, and now it's taking you 27, 30 days because you need to do a BPO and all these other things, loan tie-ins, and they've got to, check your LLC and all. It's not going to be 10 days. You're going to piss a whole lot of people off. Don't do that. So here's what I say. Look for ways to add value. Understanding your contract changes and clauses or title issues is where you can bring value when you're working with your investors. It's almost wearing a project management hat is what I've seen in the past, because your investors are usually working multiple deals, right? Finishing a project, marketing that, in escrow, closing that deal, moving the money, working on something else, putting money in that. They've got different timelines and different things happening. You may not be working all of those deals. They're working with other agents. They're working with other sellers, buyers. They're working on multiple things. If that's the case, you've got to be on top of it to keeping them abreast on, hey, did you look at the prelim? I recall with one of my investors, he wanted to build up. But guess what? The adjacent property had a CCNR, had a restriction, a build restriction that was on the property since the 1940s. Nobody knew that. I did, right? Because I actually read. I read the prelim. And what are you looking for? Conditions, covenants, restrictions, encroachments, encumbrances, liens. It's not just a nice little report with, depending on the title company, gives you a nice little grade of how wonderful, the title is, or how clean it is, or how easy it is to kind of get through those items. Like, read those items, right? 1 through 16, or sometimes 1 through 5. Pay attention if there's, right now, the big thing right now was PACE and HERO assessment liens. These are hybrid loans or super liens. Industry-wide, it's no longer a practice that the seller pays for it. That is now a very negotiable item. Seller is no longer obligated, nor were they obligated in the beginning. It was just industry practice that we were having sellers pay off the PACE and HERO liens because the Federal Finance Housing Agency said if you have an FHA insured loan or any of the government sponsored enterprises that were involved in the financing of a property that had a PACE or HERO lien, they said they were not going to fund it. They were not going to finance it. And so because of that, it became industry practice for us to automatically have the seller pay those liens off. That's not the case anymore. So pay attention. Is that showing up on your prelim? It'll also show up on your NHD report, your natural hazard disclosures report. These reports are being given to you, and not just so you can email or forward them to your buyer, your investor, but so that you too are doing your due diligence as well. It is part of your due diligence, so that your client may come to you and say, hey, oftentimes my investors will say that. I mean, I definitely disclaim, but they do say, hey, was there anything that I missed? Is there anything that jumped out at you? That's added value, right? Is that they know they've got another set of eyes on this deal with them. You know what the goal is, right? If you know they want to buy that property and build, or they're going to do conversion, they're going to do additions, improvements, then you should be paying attention to what that prelim says. We just dealt right now on our last two deals. We just dealt with a encroachment and a substandard order, or also what is called city abatements. When there's just overgrown vegetation, there's junk, there's trash. City comes and slaps a lien on there and says, if you don't clean it up, we will, and we're going to charge you for it, plus interest and penalties. Pay attention, because that is also on the property report as well. So again, communication, of course, you want to be an excellent communicator. Not just corresponding, not just sending texts and emails, but actually picking up the phone and saying, hey, this is what's going on. So keep your investor up to date on market data, on comps. If they're asking you, if you send them something, they're going to ask you, hey, so what do you think you can sell it for? Isn't that a wonderful question? You bring a deal, the investor says, yeah, I'll buy it, and then says, hey, I'll work with you on the relist once it's done. How much do you think you're going to sell it for, or could sell it for? Because you're the one that's going to sell it. You're the one that's going to market and sell it. Golden. Woo woo. Can you say win, win, win? Yeah. All right. Let's continue. Navigating financing options. How are we doing on time? Ooh, wow. This is like real class. This is going on. Navigating financing options. Okay, as we continue working with investors. So take note, most investors are using private funding or quote unquote hard money. Hard money is usually interest only loans with a balloon payment due at the end or payoff. Private funding can also come from the SEPs. You can use your SEP IRA plans. They've got a nice, cool real estate component or feature built in the I would say the Internal Revenue Code that allows you to pull money out, use it for investment. And I believe, don't quote me on this, like I said, consult your tax professional. I believe you've got 6 months to put that money back penalty free. Nice. So if you've got a SEP IRA and you want to make some money on your money, that's usually what people are doing. So a way to leverage your cash. If you're sitting on cash and you'd like to accelerate the interest earned on that, again, this is not me giving you advice, but I'm saying this is how people do it. It's how it's done. It's how our clients have done it. And it's working with a team of experienced folks. And of course, be mindful of the, turnaround time, right? I don't think right now it's 6 months. It's going to be longer. And some investors will want to give themselves more time, which is why they do hard money with usually a term of 3 years or 5 years, because they don't intend on keeping that loan for that period of time. All right. So here's what I was discussing. I was sharing about the cash or cash clause. So read your contract and discuss with your investor regarding the cash clause. I'm going to jump to this slide real quick. This is what I'm referring to. For example, this happens a lot to, I would say, listing agents or agents who are representing sellers who are not reading the fine print on those contracts, your purchase agreements. You may get an investor to submit an offer and they say, yes, I'm going to buy it cash. But then embedded in the contract, and our contracts have gone from 10 pages to 10 pages to, I think it went to 10, 12, 16 to we're like at 19. Altogether, it's like 20 something, 26 pages. So make sure in your purchase agreements, you read every line item. Yes, there's a section where these things should be placed, but it can also be strategic on the investor or the agent who's writing the offer to embed that verbiage somewhere in the contract where you might overlook. And this clause or this cash clause may read, buyer reserves the right to use private funding or hard money under the cash option. So what does that mean? You thought you were writing a 10-day cash deal, not likely going to happen. That clause right there tells you that's not likely going to happen. Because what that means is the buyer investor is likely going to OPM, use other people's money. They're going to leverage hard money. Why would they use all their money, right? When they can leverage other people's money to pick up a property. And what they're paying attention to, and I'll discuss this a couple slides further, what they're looking or measuring is the cash on cash return on investment. That's their metric, not necessarily that they paid all cash for this property and they still need money to do the rehab, the remodel, the flip, the additions, the improvements. So got to pay attention to this. Working with the investors, they will give you this cash or cash clause that says they reserve the right to use hard money. You've got to be on top of it that if they pivot to hard money, now your 10-day deal is not 10 days anymore, right? Now you need to find out when did they order the BPO, right? So second thing, contingencies. If there's a no loan or no appraisal contingency, this also includes inspection contingency, then that means the investor cannot use these findings or the valuation as an out. This is why it's good to show that they've got some good skin in the game, right? We're in California, we're talking about $10,000 minimum. Some will write 25,000, some will write higher if they want to be competitive. If they look at this deal as a nice little gold mine in terms of equity, ARV, they've run their numbers, they can make this deal work. They'd be willing to be a bit more aggressive on the deposit. If they're aggressive on the deposit, then pay attention to their contingencies, meaning how, if things don't work out, right? If they find out a little bit more that they've got to redo foundation, there's a lot more involved than they anticipated. They haven't factored that in their price. They're going to want out of this deal. They're going to want to cancel and not have to perform. So pay attention to those contingencies. If they write a no loan or no appraisal contingency or no inspection contingency, you should also make sure that they have a contingency removal form included. Let them put their money where their mouth is what I say. If you're not going to be as aggressive, then don't act like you're aggressive. If you need the protections, then keep them. But we're not going to act like, oh, no contingency, cash deal, that whole big talk. Because again, we're talking about your reputation, your rapport with your client. If you're representing a seller as well, you don't want to put them at risk and doing a deal with somebody that's not going to perform or play games. because those contingencies can also cost you money. Those contingencies can cause a seller, we see this all the time, a seller to have to face a huge discount. If there's an inspection contingency, the investor says, I'm doing a cash deal, 15 days, no loan, no appraisal contingency, but I'd like a 7-day inspection contingency. So that means your property or client or the seller will be tied up for 7 days. And a lot can happen in 7 days. I did a 3-day inspection contingency with an investor, and I was representing the seller. I was not representing the buyer. The seller, excuse me, I was not representing the buyer. The buyer had an agent represent them, and they had a 3-day inspection contingency. And I did something really aggressive, which meant that after 3 days, they would also release their deposit to my seller. Essentially, we wanted to guarantee that that seller or that buyer investor was going to buy this property from my client. I don't recommend that. I do not recommend that if you are not, you gotta really know how to work this contract, and you've got to really know how to work with your investors. So when I wrote that the EMD, called the earnest money deposit, was due to be released in 3 days, which was also the 3-day inspection contingency period for that buyer, the agent said, well, the foundation needs to be done, and it's going to cost us about, 52,000. And so we are going to need, we're willing to move forward. I love that, right? We're willing to move forward, but we need a price reduction, or we want a seller credit. He says, we're not going to ask for the whole 50,000, but we'll take 30. You want a $30,000 price reduction or seller credit? No, you're open to negotiating, but I'm going to hold you to the offer that you wrote. The offer was that you weren't going to ask for deductions. You weren't going to ask for seller credits. In fact, it was in my addendum. You signed an addendum that said that you were purchasing this property as is, with no price reductions or seller credits and or repairs. That's okay. I'm not going to be mad that you're asking. Not at all, because I wrote in a very aggressive term. And the buyer's agent says, well, it's better than going back to market. And I always remember this, because that's not a negotiating strategy, to tell the other party, well, you should take this reduction because it's better than going back to market. And I'm like, I've only been off market for 3 days, and it was by design. It was by design. You're not going to tie us up for 7, 14 days, 17 days. It's by design. 3 days is what you got. Get in, get out, get your estimates, your inspections done, do your due diligence. Because I want you to do your due diligence. I definitely, in the long run, don't want you to say you didn't have time, you weren't given that option. No. Of course, we want our sellers to make sure our sellers are protected in that as well, that we want you to do your due diligence. Last thing we want is for you to say, especially, if it's a court approval or subject to court confirmation proceeding or hearing, we don't want you to tell the judge, Your Honor, I didn't get a chance to do my due diligence inspection. Don't want you saying that, because then everyone looks at me and says, well, it's her fault. No. So pay attention to those contingencies. All right. The other item is title insurance. Look out for I mentioned it, right? The CC&Rs, your conditions, covenants and restrictions, encroachments, if you know your investor wants to convert, build, or make improvements. That's very, very important, because if you wrote a deal that has no contingencies, at minimum, added value and protect your investor client when you're working with your investor, whether it's a new investor or an experienced investor, they will know, and you should remind them that if you are going to waive most, if not all contingencies, the one contingency you should keep in play is your preliminary report. That has to do with the title insurance. That is the one contingency that you should keep in play to protect your investor, especially if they are anticipating doing improvements to that property, because there may be things on there that will prohibit or block, hinder, impede, you get it? Stop them from doing those improvements. If they're still willing to move forward knowing that, then that's all you can do. But at least you'll have an acknowledgement, right? They have to sign off on that prelim approval. They're signing off that they are accepting the title with these items on it if they decide to move forward. I had a client, actually a couple deals I've noticed with investors, that there was CC&R and there was another, again, it's very funny because as we are now moving into a period with lot splits, back in the day, a lot of these lots were originally owned by one owner who then split the lot and sold the property. When they split the lot back in the 1920s, 40s, 50s, 60s, what they also did was put a CC&R, which was a build restriction. And oftentimes they said, I don't want you to build high enough where you're blocking my view. Yes, that, I'm selling piece of my land, but I don't want you to build a property that now blocks my window. It's still on there. How do you resolve it? We had one deal where we had to go to the next door neighbor who had no idea she had a build restriction on the adjacent lot, right, with the neighboring lot. And so you definitely leave that to attorneys. You as an agent or someone, you've got to defer your client or investor to consult an attorney when it comes to that conversation, because that can be a litigious conversation. Sign here, sign here. And then people are like, what am I signing? You just have a restriction on my land that I want you to remove. Huh? Exactly. Don't want to get caught up in that. No fun. Last one is BPOs. So as we're talking about hard money, BPOs are broker priced opinions, essentially like an appraisal valuation. And this, if you go from cash to cash equivalent, as in a hard money in your deal, and you're working with your investor, make sure you're staying on top of it with your investor and you find out when that BPO is ordered, when it got done, when is the turnaround time, because your 10-day cash deal, 10 to 15-day cash deal is not going to be 10 to 15 days anymore. And so you can now end up stressing out your seller clients who are anticipating on this money. They need the money for whatever mandates or their own personal obligations that they need to meet, especially again, if we're running up against a clock of foreclosure, a trustee sale, or an auction. It's very important to understand that if you do a hard money loan, there's such a thing called a broker priced opinion, which means a broker, the company, the lender will call out a broker. They come out, they run comps, they do valuation. And one of the things that they do, it's almost like a desktop appraisal where it's a drive-by, right? They come out. If they need to access the property, that could be a problem. So you need to be clear. If your investor's buying a property with occupants, they're not cooperating, you got to be mindful if you're doing a hard money and your BPO is saying they need to get inside or they need to look inside, because it's not going to happen. So it's not going to happen. Be mindful. Again, these are the risks that you take when working with investors. Understand the financing part. That's key. And this BPO can be a deal breaker, because also if they said no appraisal contingency, that means if this BPO, this valuation doesn't come in where it needs to be, it can cost your investor a lot more money, where they will have to bring more money to the table than they anticipated. And the financing, right, going from cash to hard money can just fall apart completely if they don't have enough reserves. They don't have enough reserves to bring to the table because the BPO valuation is not cutting it. All right, so cool. So here's a couple things, and I'm gonna wrap it up here. Building up your reputation, profitability. You want this to be a win-win-win for you, your investor, working with the investor. So know what the investor's profit margins are. They'll tell you. Just ask. What are you typically looking for? Right? What kind of return are you looking for? What kind of return are you expecting? Create your spreadsheet. So use spreadsheets and learn your formulas, your cash on cash return on investment, your ARVs, your NOIs, your caps. So use your spreadsheets. Be consistent. Stay up. Stay on top of your messages, your follow-up, giving them a call, and making sure you're writing up your offers and you're following up on your offers. Just because your offer didn't get accepted, hey, until the status changes to sold, there's still an opportunity to go check in on a pending property, find out what's happening. Hey, how's your deal going? Does it look like it's going through? When are the contingencies set to be removed, if any? I tell you, in a very hard market like this is where we go shopping. I go shopping in the pending, not so much the active. I go shopping in the pending. If it's been pending for a couple of days, I go and say, hey, what's going on over there? Can we help? And you'd be surprised how an agent will say, yes, we're falling out of escrow. Pulling out hair, falling out of escrow. All right. And then the last thing is make sure you get that proof of funds. When you get ready to write it up or your investors gives you the green light and it's time to package that offer, you want to make sure that you get the proof of funds, bank statement, or the letter of intent, and it's verified. Make sure it's verified. All right. That's golden. Like all this is golden. All right. So thank you for your time. We went over time, but this is great because it's been a while. I got to bond with you today. If you have questions, send an email to Lisa at lasuperaagent.com. Again, send an email to Lisa at lasuperaagent.com. If you have specific questions, you want to reach out, you're in the market, looking to sell, buy, or rent, I'll leave my number, 323-488-3265. You can call or text. So call or text. I am available for I do have late hours. I carry late hours because we do work with those who are in dire situations, oftentimes dealing with the death of a property owner and or borrower, sometimes dealing with a reverse mortgage or foreclosure. So I do keep late hours, and we make ourselves available for those people. No cost consults, of course, for those who are interested in just learning more about whatever resolutions they can come to depending on their situation. All right. I will see you next week. This has been great. If you found this information valuable, please drop us a comment, send me a message. I really appreciate it. And thanks for growing the show with us. We've got like over 900 something subscribers on our YouTube, doing amazing things. We are like top 25 podcasts in our genre, just pumping out content here for you. So I just want to say, I appreciate you. Love you, love you, love you. And we'll see you next week on another information-packed episode on Ready, Set, Real Estate. Take care, guys. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Ready, Set, Real Estate podcast with Lisa Gillett, the LA Super Agent. Please like, subscribe, and share LA Super Agent everywhere on your favorite podcast platform.